Well, praise the Lord, saints. This is Elder Adrian Heyman. For those of you that have been waiting for a continuation of the series on the book of Genesis, we're doing another installment of it right now. We're at chapter number 11. We've been going through the genealogy of Shem. Shem, essentially, one of the three sons of Noah. And it takes us to, essentially, the beginnings of the one that we know as Abraham. Although, of course, at that particular time, he was Abram. And that's now, we'll start off with Genesis chapter 11, verse number 28. No, I'm sorry, verse 27. Chapter number 11, verse 27. It says, now these are the generations of Terah. Now, Terah is the one who was the father of Abraham. This is where all this starts. Now, but I want you to understand this, though. Terah was not a Yahweh worshiper. The word didn't come to Terah. Terah was an idol worshiper, like all those who were his contemporaries. They were all idol worshipers. So it's not something that you would put Terah down for. That's what he knew. But the Lord was speaking to Abraham. Now, I just thought of something. It is amazing that the Lord, that some people will come to God, and some will hear the same message and refuse him every single time. And I thank God that I submitted to him with all my faults, with all my foibles, my troubles, and he decided to save me. This is not a small thing. He could have left me where I was, but he decided to save me. We don't know necessarily if the Lord was speaking to Abram before he left his father's house. But this was his father. His father was Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran begat Lot. So it looks like Abram was the oldest, possibly. Nahor was second, and Haran was the little brother. And Haran then was the father of Lot. Verse 28 says, and Haran died before his father Terah, in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. This is also where the Chaldeans, if you read about the Chaldees and the Babylonians, how they rose up together in the realm of Nebuchadnezzar, this was where they had began. So this was again in the region of Mesopotamia, close to the Persian Gulf, where we have the confluence of two countries, Iran and Iraq. But here it is, Ur of the Chaldees. That's where Terah was. That's where they had traveled to, or his ancestors traveled to, from Babel. But Haran was the one that essentially died before his father. Some people may talk that he died in the presence of his father. That's possible. But I tend to think that this is essentially that saying that Haran did not outlive his father. His father outlived Haran, which could have been any reason. Any reason could have happened. Disease, injury, whatever. Doesn't say how. But he passed away. And he died where he was born. So he never left Ur. Haran never left Ur. It says, verse 29, and Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. Of course, we all better know her as Sarah. But as you see, Sarai was not a stranger. Sarai was Abram's sister. In those days, yes, you could marry your sister. In this case, it may have been a half-sister. It doesn't say whether, at this particular juncture, it doesn't say whether she had a different mother, possibly, or a different father. Probably a different mother. Because it was also not unusual to marry more than one wife at that particular time. Again, a consequence of the times. And still, there wasn't a lot of people in this world. So you still had people that were trying to get with their family members just because they, there wasn't that many, there wasn't that many other candidates, so to speak. But it also could be the reason why the lifespans were getting shorter. From, again, Noah lived over 900 years until this time, whereas essentially Terah lived over 200 years, and that seemed to be a lot for the time. But it was nothing compared to his ancestors. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah. Milcah, the daughter of Haran. Now, Milcah was essentially Nahor's, cousin, so to speak. Milcah, the daughter of Haran. Actually, no. Milcah was actually Nahor's niece. Yes. Nahor's niece. But as I said before, this could take place in those days. This is why we have to make sure that we know the context before we make doctrines here and there. We have to make sure we know what the practice is, what God allowed during that time, what he doesn't allow now. Possibly he allowed it then because of the amount of people that were there. You don't need to marry your sister today. You don't need to marry your brother today. You don't need to marry your niece today, or your nephew, or your uncle, or your aunt. Why? Because there's so many people in the world, essentially, and the body has, be honest, adapted to that. The body tells you, don't mess with your sister. Don't mess with your brother. That's not, just because it was good or okay in Abraham's time doesn't mean it's okay now. Just a thought. Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, who was then again the father of Milcah and the father of Iscah. So essentially Haran, again, who had died, had bore Milcah, Iscah, and Lot. Verse number 30, but Sarai was barren. She had no child. Milcah wasn't barren. And that was actually a blessing. Because later on, when Abraham sent Isaac to his father's house to find a wife, he was able to find someone that came from Nahor and Milcah. But Sarai, again, was barren. And that was to be a big test. Verse 31, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son. It means it was Terah's grandson. Lot was Terah's grandson. And Sarai, his daughter-in-law. then it must have meant the same mother, but different fathers. Possible, possibly, because Sarai was his daughter-in-law. Now we get a clarification of it. His son Abram's wife. And they went forth with him from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. So that's a surprise. Terah was going to go to the land of Canaan. What his reasons were for doing it, we don't quite know. But the purpose of Terah was to go to the land of Canaan, to leave Ur of the Chaldees. And they came unto a place called Haran, named for Terah's son Haran. They built there, they stopped there. Sometimes you can do a work for God. You can do a work that the Lord is blessing. And you can move forward until something stops you. And then you get comfortable there. You get rested there. You thought that, okay, I was going to do something else, but now I'm more comfortable doing this. And how many times do we miss out on our blessings because we stop what we were supposed to do and we get comfortable where we are? That's what Terah did. Now, again, it's not saying that the Lord spoke to Terah, because it doesn't say that in here. But Terah was moving to Canaan. That was his plan, to go to the land of Canaan. But they stopped and built at Haran. Verse 32. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. He had meant to go to Canaan, but he instead stayed and built in Haran. And that's as far as Terah got. But possibly that was a blessing in disguise. Remember, all things do work together for good to them who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose. In this sense, Terah essentially would have went to Canaan and would have been an influence possibly on Abram, being his father, if he had continued to go to Canaan with Abram. But because his father died, that broke away from his father's influence. Sometimes family influence can keep you from what you're supposed to do. And then God has to take the family away. Not that he's going to kill the family, but he has to lessen their influence because you have a work to do. Saint, you have a work to do. Brother, you have a work to do. Sister, you have a work to do. And you can't let any tie stop you from that work. Someone said, in the year King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord. And that was Isaiah. Some people take that as that Uzziah may have had an influence on Isaiah. But once Uzziah died, the Lord gave him a vision clearly. That's an interpretation. Here it's possible that as long as Terah was with Abraham, and Abram was going to do, as a dutiful son, follow what his father said, even if that meant stay in idolatry. So when Terah died, that loosed the bonds that his father's house, Abram's father's house, had on him. And now he's ready for the Lord to use him. Pick it up next time in Genesis chapter 12. May God bless you and may he keep you. Love you all and take care in Jesus' name.